Friends, outside I like to apologize for coming late. Actually, at another meeting taken because I was sent out there. And outside I like to thank Bayan for inviting me to share some ideas on Ambedkar's theory of democracy. Last 2 years I have been working on this for some time. And the paper which is published by National Institute of Advanced Studies in collaboration with Yale University, published by Reference. So this part of that exercise. I will get draft. It is actually I am still discussing this draft with my colleagues and friends. So I would like to take feedback from you and like to revise my draft, which I submitted from you. Therefore, there is nothing finished by me, and even if paper is finished, I will still revise it next time when I publish a book. So this Ambedkar theory of democracy is a bit complex, and many people have worked on this in several forms. I like to state my conclusions in the beginning, then I will examine them later. Generally, in the literature on democracy on Ambedkar, people have tried to offer a distinction between political and social democracy in Ambedkar. And they say that Ambedkar's main contribution is actually social democracy. They argue that the social precedes the political. So social democracy is more important than the political democracy. Social democracy is the foundation on the basis of which political democracy ought to be built. This is a major theme of most of the contributors, starting from Kumar to Mirananda, to almost everybody working on Ambedkar highlighted this contribution. In my view, this is very important, but however, I have a different take on this distinction, brought out by many others. But the take is important. In addition to this important take, there are two more important arguments, or two more important classifications of democracy by Ambedkar, which has not been worked out. There are there in Ambedkar's volumes spread out across several things, several documents, several books which he himself has published. Another distinction Ambedkar brings to discussion table is that there is also democracy. There is also distinction between democracy as a mechanism and democracy as a value system. This is a very important distinction Ambedkar makes in course of his discussion on democracy. Third important distinction Ambedkar established also is that democracy is appeasement, democracy as a settlement of people's grievances. This is a very important distinction again. In view of the light of discussion on appeasement, etc., buying, writing, this dialogue becomes very important for me. And therefore, to verify, there are three forms of distinction. Distinction between political and social democracy, distinction between democracy as a mechanism, democracy as a value system, distinction between democracy as appeasement policy, democracy as a policy of settlement of popular grievances. This is very important. Keep everybody happy or keep elites unhappy, keep the people happy. This is important distinction for Ambedkar. Before I elaborate this point, let me state some methodological arguments in the beginning. When we try to examine texts of these great minds, it is necessary for us to pay attention to not merely what is stated in the text, the obvious has to be discovered by us, but at the same time, what is not obvious to us, what is a deep discourse, or what is a deep structural element in a textual thinking, that must be also discovered by us. The task of theory is not to state or restate the obvious one. If you don't state the obvious one, obviously you are at a deeper point. But which is what happened to many others, because most others have missed out the obvious 2 points which I just laid out for you. But it is also important for a theory to uncover what is not so obvious, what is not stated by a particular thinker, but is there deep in his practice. And therefore, the element of practice needs to be theorized, not simply what is obviously stated in the body of text, which is what most of us in the left-wing traditions actually caught with, and as a result we have undermined Ambedkar's practice. And Ambedkar, as I said before, in a seminar organized by Prof, Ambedkar belongs to intellectual tradition of Vita Activa, not Vita Contemplativa. Anna Arendt makes a distinction for Europe, that European intellectuals can be grouped under two rubrics. One rubric of intellectuals, they purely contemplate and give outline of theory in contemplation. They can be called as desktop intellectuals. The other group of intellectuals, they are engaged with public and they dialogue with public by mobilizing people. They formulate their ideas. That is also deep theory. They are called Vita Activa intellectuals. People who are action oriented, action guides them. Therefore, those intellectuals who belong to Vita Activa must be understood differently than those intellectuals who belong to Vita Contemplativa. The methodological yardsticks must shift from one intellectual who belongs to one group to another intellectual who belongs to different group. This is what political theories have not done. I am right. Most of us have followed only the methodological tricks we follow that must be applied to intellectuals who belong to Vita Contemplativa, and we transfer those methodological techniques to those intellectuals who actually belong to traditional Vita Activa. Yes, I submit here one argument, and you can debate over this. That those who belong to Vita Activa, they always leave out what I call a theoretical surplus, because in the course of action, the reflexes, they can understand things, they can grasp things, yet they don't write about it. And therefore, in Ambedkar's activities, there is a language which must be understood by us. Therefore, that language can't be equated with the textual language. Those writings are not there. I will give an example of how it happens. It happened in large number of intellectuals. In case of Lenin, Althusser makes this point. Lenin belongs to the Vita Activa tradition, and therefore some of the elements of Lenin's thought are not theorized by him. And therefore there is a surplus in Lenin's practice that must be understood by a thinker called Althusser. The same task we must follow in case of the Gramsci, who is activist intellectual, in case of Marx, who is another activist intellectual, who is Ambedkar, so also Ambedkar. These are all intellectuals who belong to Vita Activa tradition. They can't be simply understood in the light of Vita Contemplativa intellectuals. So research method must be differently used to understand these groups of intellectuals who are action-oriented intellectuals. They are in constant dialogue with the public, with enemy, with friends, with people at large. And if you do that, you find there is a lot of surplus in Ambedkar's thinking, and if you don't pay attention to that surplus in Ambedkar's thinking, you arrive at quite different conclusions. I'll give two important insights on this. One, if you take, for example, annihilation of caste, Ambedkar talks as if he has to only transform Indian society, and he has to enlighten the unenlightened Dalits, and he has to educate the superstitious Dalits, use the term superstitious Dalits, and he has to educate them. But in actual practice, he gets educated by Dalits themselves, and he revises his views constantly in dialogue with the Dalits themselves. Therefore, he is an educator who is willing to learn from Dalits, which is not stated by him. Nowhere he states that this is there in practice. I will give two examples. The educator learning from people whom he tries to educate, whom he calls superstitious. Now, devoid of this practical connection, intellectuals like Mirananda, Bhikkhu Parekh, and many others, they paint Ambedkar as a rationalist thinker, as one who believes in superiority of reason, and reason must transform the common sense world, which reason must play a role. But reason is actually expected to educate, enlighten, and reveal truth before the illiterate subalterns. Therefore, reason is meant to educate rather than learn from people. This is called, this is a typical rationalist argument, where reason or the intellectual is actually the educator, not the learner. He is a teacher, not a student. This dialectic actually ceases with the enlightenment tradition, or what I call the rationalist tradition. Now, Mirananda to Bhikkhu Parekh, they paint Ambedkar as a rationalist. is one who is only educating public, not learning from people. This painting is not very correct if you look at practice. Textually, if you go by textual elements, especially analysis of caste, Mirananda, right, many others are right. But if you look at Ambedkar practice, they are not right. I give two examples. While drafting this War Vatan Bill in Maharashtra Assembly in 1928 or so, Ambedkar wrote a draft how War Vatan must be abolished. War Vatan basically means is a kind of bonded level. So Mars were actually bonded in different forms in different villages variously in southern coastal Maharashtra. So Ambedkar and many others were demanding that Mar Vatan must go, and they were actually rendering all kinds of unpaid services to varieties of people, and varieties of activities are doing from domestic to official work for the village head, for landlords, for even the clerks and their servants. The position was pathetic during the British period. And British state not merely strengthened the feudal systems, which was inflicted on them through unpaid service. That Vatan means unpaid service. And British state actually extended that unpaid service. And when class 4 employees in Tahsil office or block development office or collectorate office were asking these Mars to contribute to unpaid service, even domestic unpaid service. Therefore, the entire unpaid service became burdensome. And Ambedkar, many others rebelled against that. They demanded to abolish that, but he prepared the draft bill. But once he prepared draft bill, he realized that he must discuss with people. He amended that this draft bill several times by discussing with Mars across southern Maharashtra. He had several rounds of meetings, and therefore here is the educator who is not unwilling to learn from ordinary Mars. They are non-intellectual Mars. They are subaltern Mars. He is intellectual, but he is not unwilling, I say. Not unwilling to learn from them. Now, if suppose he is only educated, then here is an example where he is a learner. He is learning from, what did he learn? He learned that there are many forms of Mar Vatan. Some are created by Jamindari system in the pre-British era. Some were created by the British system. British system also accumulated and added new things. As a result of this, for example, Mars were actually doing unpaid service to class 4 employees from upper caste. So therefore, whole thing became obnoxious, and therefore he learned therefore he identified several forms of Vatan, the colonial time and pre-colonial time, and revised his draft bill. And when the draft bill was placed in the Maharashtra Assembly, it was defeated. It was revived in 50 and got approved later. It took some time, but it was defeated by politics. And what I am drawing your attention to is, Ambedkar is a learning from people here. It's a very important learning. He is an intellectual who is prepared to learn from people while trying to educate them. Educator is being educated. Remember Karl Marx, thesis 4. On thesis of pure God. What does Marx say? Educator must be educated. This is what exactly Ambedkar is doing here. He is prepared to be educated by those people whom he tries to enlighten in the annihilation of caste. This practice is outside the annihilation of caste. He is exactly doing the opposite. He has given a draft bill, and he is not imposing the draft bill on Marx. He is willing to learn from them, revise, adopt new forms of Mar Vatan that must be abolished now. Second, that is when he was very young. When he was very old, but when he was very mature, around 1950s, before he resigned from Nehru cabinet, when he was actually piloting the Hindu Code Bill, one remarkable thing he did. He carried dialogue with all groups of women, from Hindu women to Christian to all groups of women, and tried to find out across political parties, and try to find out what is wrong with this draft. So here is an intellectual who is placing himself on test vis-a-vis the group that addresses. He is to educate. Minister must believe in educating people. not learn from them. But here is intellectual who is willing to learn from almost everybody, including the enemies in the right view. Now he considered one thing while finalizing draft. He makes a very interesting shift. He argues that, in contrast with the debate on Gandhi while writing Analysis of Caste, now he accepts that Hindus also believe in some forms of equality. Against Gandhi, he said Hindus don't believe in equality, they don't practice equality. But Analysis of Caste, he gives what I would say, he mentions that point very very subsidiarily. There is not a primary argument, but against Gandhi argued that Hindus are reforms. Against Gandhi argued that Hindus practice inequalities. Against Gandhi argued that Hindus do this, Hindus do that. Therefore, he doesn't believe in Hinduism. He has abandoned Hinduism. But while piloting Hindu code bill, he does exactly opposite. He takes up Gandhi's argument. He argues that Hindus believe in reforms. He argues that Hindus believe in equality. And that is actually what is a subsidiary argument in Analysis of Caste. It becomes a dominant argument in the Hindu code bill. That is present. He argues that in the Analysis of Caste, read carefully. He argues that Upanishad, which is a Hindu text that practices, that talks about equality. That is, and argues that Hindu kings also practice some kind of equality. That's made in passing. Therefore, I say that in a textual mode, that is a subsidiary argument. The main argument is to expose Hindu hegemony practices, and therefore the debate with Gandhi, he comes back to the main argument. He simply discards Gandhi's argument that Hindus also believe in reforms. Hindu society can be reformed. So he completely takes a hostile position to Gandhi's argument. Gandhi says that Hindus also believe in equality. Hindus also can reform, while Hindus believe in hegemony, etc. But Hindus can also be challenged by Hindus. So Hinduism can be internally reformed. That is Gandhi's argument. Now in the Hindu code bill, Ambedkar takes the same argument. He argues that Hindus can also internally reform. That's the important point, and therefore it takes the Gandhian view by learning from women. It's a point made by women. Then, interestingly, makes a dramatic announcement. Now he says, Manusmriti also talks about equality. This is fantastic. I have very brilliant point. It's a path-breaking point because the man who burned Manusmriti years back now comes back to say that text is bad, yet there are elements of equality. For example, he says on women's issue that Hindu Manusmriti and Narasmriti also talk about distribution of ancestral property among women. This is a path-breaking point. Ambedkar makes this argument. He learns from all the Hindu women. Then he says that Smritis, which he denounced against Gandhi, now he discovers some reformist streak in Smritis, which he denounced outrightly on when he was debating with Gandhi. But what is his old position? He is not given up his old position. He is critical of Smritis. Now what is strategy he adopted? Now he adopted internal critique of religion. Therefore, by learning from Hindu women, he realized that every religion is oppressive, and every religion must be internally criticized, internally pushed for reform, and which he didn't accept in 1935 debate with Gandhi. Now he accepts it. And that was actually his position. As I said, that is subsidiary argument in the Analysis of Caste. Now that becomes main argument. But he learns from dialogue from the Hindu women, dialogue with Hindu women. That is important for me. Rather than the debate on Manusmriti, interesting, I have written a detail about that. My point is that Smritis talk about distribution of property among women, distribution of parental property. This is a path-breaking argument Ambedkar makes in the Hindu code bill. Path-breaking from which point of view? Path-breaking from the point of view of Hindu society, path-breaking from the point of view for Hindu women. So path-breaking from multiple vantage points, and very interesting take on that. Now, what we find is, basically, what is indicate that Ambedkar is educator, yes, but also a learner all the time. Always dialoguing with even enemies. Hindu right-wing women, were there part of his entourage with whom he was having dialogue while discussing Hindu code bill. Therefore, he was open-minded about dialogue with almost everybody, and that is key in Ambedkar's practice, and a very extraordinary dialogic-oriented man. The another point I would like to draw your attention to about his notion of constitutional morality. This is a very important point because that's key for Ambedkar's notion of democracy. And why dialogue? Ambedkar argues that the Indian constitution, if you know, Ambedkar argues that constitutional morality is very important to promote ethics, values of Indian constitution, Indian democracy. And the constitution of India actually is an embodiment of social and political democracy. Therefore, Ambedkar was worried that Indians may fail the constitution, and but he gave a warning that Indians must respect the constitutional morality. So long as they respect constitutional morality, it is possible for India to deepen its democracy. And what is constitutional morality? Constitutional morality has different types. Again, most of those who try to understand constitutional morality textually, they define like this. Constitutional morality basically means respect for the constitutional methods, constitutional oriented or constitutional sponsored institutions and their principles. So this is what almost everybody has said. The notion of secularism, notion of federalism, notion of parliamentary institution, parliamentary democracy, universal suffrage, etc. These are all ingrained in the Constitution of India. And similarly, some forms of decentralization is equally important. Then many other things are there in the Constitution. But respecting these norms, principles, and institutions enshrined in the Constitution of India is an important task of people who believe in constitutional morality. This term is drawn from the Roman interpretation of this Greek tradition. But Ambedkar's take is interesting here. And most of those, for example, Patnaik has written a paper on this constitutional morality, and he states the obvious. Constitutional morality refers to, for him, it refers to all these methods and institutions that Indian Constitution has championed. That's what Ambedkar says. But what is not obvious in that Ambedkar statement is how this constitutional morality is brought about. Can it happen? And answer to this question is very important because let us look at the other way around. What does Ambedkar say when there is a crisis of constitutional morality? When people of India don't obey constitutional morality, what will happen? Ambedkar argues that if there is crisis of constitutional morality, people of India will resort to violent methods or methods of satyagraha or passive resistance. Now, many people argue that Ambedkar is a typical constitutionalist, very liberal, and therefore he is scornful of passive resistance, satyagraha, which at one time he defended against caste system, and therefore now he argues that every struggle, every form of struggle must be guided by rule of law, and there must be subordinate to the primacy of the constitution. Any extra constitutional activity, even if it is peaceful, is now scorned by this great mind. Narendra is a classic example, classic interpreter of Ambedkar, is one of the Ambedkarites of liberal tradition. He has given this interpretation, and I would like to differ from him. Similarly, my friend Patnaik, he also offers interpretation which is based on the obvious. The Ambedkar says that constitutional morality means methods and institutions enshrined in the Constitution. But how these methods and institutions enshrined in the Constitution have come about, that is critical for theorizing, understanding that concept of constitutional morality. How? Question, how is it, not what it is, what does it refer to? It refers to the obvious things which are enshrined in the Constitution. But how these things have come about? Can they come about without deliberative democracy? Can they come about without dialogue? The question here is constitutional morality needs dialogue all the time. Without dialogue, can constitutional morality be evolved? Now, if constitutional morality collapses, what is the opening up? It opens up to war. War through satyagraha, war through violent methods, or passive resistance. Now, therefore, Ambedkar's formulation, these two lines of thinking, dialogue and war, are two sides of the same coin. And what was his take? When Hindu Code Bill failed, he resigned. He came back to Satyagraha mode. Therefore, Narendra Jadhav and Pratap Mehta's interpretation of Ambedkar, obvious things, misses out what is implicit in Ambedkar's practice. Therefore, the point I am trying to say that there is a surplus in Ambedkar's practice which is not stated by him, which is unstated or stated marginally in different texts. Therefore, by looking at the obvious things in the text, by drawing inferences, conclusions from what is obvious in the text, we will not do justice to intellectual who belongs to tradition of vita activa. Because in this tradition, you have to discover the implicit in their statements, implicit in their practices. Practice guides them for action. Therefore, how they practice that practice, how they practice those norms and institutions which is prescribed for us, that is important for us. Therefore, you look at the constitutional morality once again, you will find that the root of constitutional morality is a dialogue, deliberation that happened in the floor of the Constitutional Assembly. Without dialogue and deliberation, happening in the floor of the Constitutional Assembly, Ambedkar would not have learned about the point that I made about Gandhi's that Hindus can also internally reform themselves. This is a point he learned from Gandhi, retrospective effect, but also from Hindu women with whom he was having dialogue. This is therefore, Smithis also talk about some notions of women's right to property, which is not recognized by other Smithis. Therefore, Hinduism is having texts which challenge each other. There are Smithis that talk about some forms of property-based equality. There are Smithis that deny that. Therefore, he comes back to Gandhi's point without recognizing, without acknowledging it. But point is, Ambedkar was a continuous learner. So, learning from people all the time, not just educated, not simply the one who is enlightening people, as Bhikkhu Parekh or Virananda try to portray. Therefore, he is not a typical rationalist. He is not a typical romantic thinker. He is in a way kind of a middle thinker who tries to explore, avoid extreme paths of romantic glorification of what people believe in and condemning people as superstitious, blind, and therefore must be educated. This he tried to avoid this extreme paths and follow middle ground theory. Now this theory is actually inherent in practice. If you look at practice only, you can find out. If you look at theory in the text, the meanings in the text, you won't find very well. They are there, but they are present in a minor form or they are absent altogether. But in practice, they are very much present. He was oriented toward dialogue all the time. Therefore, he argued that if constitutional morality fails, people of India may resort to war. The 2 points of war, active war or passive war, but war nevertheless. Satyagraha is also war. The passive resistance is also kind of war. Similarly, violent war is a war, that is obvious war. So therefore he said that if dialogue fails, many roads to war will happen. That's what happened to University of Hyderabad last semester. Therefore you can understand why Ambedkar talks about dialogue. And why I talk about dialogue more often than others in the University of Hyderabad. This is an important lesson for us because Ambedkar's theory of dialogue is very illuminating and very inspiring for me who believes in dialogue very powerfully, and the failure of dialogue leads to war, which is obvious. You can ask anybody, Ratnam, many others, how dialogue failed and war began in the University of Hyderabad. Therefore, this is important. Take Ambedkar's hypothesis is quite valid. If people don't believe in dialogue, dialogue is failed by varieties of forces, then people may resort to war. It could be satyagraha, it could be violent protest. The suicide is also violent protest. While JSC conducted satyagraha, we probably not desirable, we provide the dialogue successful. Therefore, this is exactly the testing ground for Ambedkar's hypothesis. When dialogue fails, war begins. Testing ground is university. I don't have to look behind university to test Ambedkar's hypothesis. So this is my point. How much time? Okay, I will sum up. So what I second 2 points I will do. I said another form of distinction is, since you know the distinction between political and social democracy, I would not like to elaborate that. You can read any literature, you can find this distinction outlined by almost all interpreters, commentators of Ambedkar. The point is well taken. Ambedkar argues that social democracy is the foundation for political democracy, and without social democracy, political democracy becomes weak. Therefore, social democracy becomes strong, then political democracy becomes strong. This argument has been stated by almost everybody. I will not repeat them. I agree with them, but we can debate, discuss that later on. The other 2 points are not known. This is again obviously not restated by us. Sometimes we are not able to go beyond the obvious to discover implicit theory in practice. Sometimes what is obvious is not even recast by us. I am quite surprised by the lapses in our memories and theories. Ambedkar in work on Pakistan argues quite clearly that democracy is a policy of appeasement, will be harmful for democracy. Democracy is, business of democracy is not to keep everybody happy. Business of democracy is to keep some people happy, unhappy, and some people happy. You can't maintain everybody unhappy. Society is unequal. There are varieties of inequalities. You must address the question of inequality directly, frontally. Democracy's job is to settle questions of inequalities, problems raised by inequalities. You must settle them from time and again. Then you can address popular grievances. People are aggrieved for varieties of reasons because of inequalities, varieties of inequalities. So caste, religion, and many other economic inequalities, so on and so forth. He argued that we must oppose not merely Brahminism but also capitalism. Therefore, he was very clear about that. Sparring social democracy is twofold: social and economic. So economic democracy is part of social democracy. So social precedes economic, as economic precedes political. So this is a law of precedence he used very effectively throughout his writings. Now what does it mean basically? That democracy can't simply keep elites happy. Democracy, job of democracy is to address the questions of grievances of common people and keep them happy. If elites are unhappy, let it be so. The task of democracy is to enforce happiness among common people and address their grievances from time to time. Therefore, policy of appeasement, keeping everybody happy, elites and common people, will not work. Because society is very unequal. He argues quite clearly that in such a scenario, policy of appeasement would actually produce Hitlers from religious communities, and it will ultimately provide threat to political secularism. Secularism is about politics. Secular democracy is about political democracy, not social democracy. Then political democracy will be in peril if democracy is pursued as a policy of appeasement of elites and people. You can't appease elites and people at the same time. Therefore, his attack on Gandhi and Nehru was this: as a Gandhi and Nehru adopted a policy of appeasement of elites among Muslims. Now, actually, in the Muslim question, the argument comes actually. So, the result of this, Muslim League became Hitler-like organization, and they dictated terms and they established Pakistan. Probably there is a inevitable lapse of concentration of democracy. So democracy, as a policy of appeasement, is likely to produce Hitlers among the religious communities. It's an interesting hypothesis Ambedkar offers. Very interesting argument. Now he says, he continues, argues in the same text, says that if democracy, as a policy of appeasement, can produce Hitlers among Muslims today, they will in turn produce Hitlers among Hindus tomorrow. So that means what? Tomorrow will not happen next day, it will happen simultaneously. Therefore, Hitlers among Muslims will produce Hitlers among Christians, Hitlers among Hindus, and so on and so forth. As a result, there will spread of Hitlers in the field of politics. Then how do you secure future of political democracy? You have to secure social democracy and political democracy, but the policy of appeasement in name of political democracy will produce Hitlers who will provide a threat to survival of political democracy. This is Ambedkar. This is very interesting. Hitler for him actually symbolizes not only fascism. Maybe there is no military-based fascism in India, but there is probably the experience by the borders of India, Nagaland or Kashmir. But in the mainstream India, you have semi-fascist tendencies, authoritarian tendencies, the Hitler-like leaders, intellectuals, vice chancellors, and so on and so forth. Now, policy of appeasement actually produces Hitler's-like personalities across India. Therefore, he argued against Gandhi and Nehru, said that this democracy as a policy of appeasement must go. You must address popular grievances through democratic means, dialogue with them, dialogue with elites,